The Durham investigation concludes, showing that there is no evidence that Trump colluded with Russia and there should never have been an investigation into the Trump campaign. I go over a brief history of the Trump-Russia collusion story and the media's reaction in this episode of the Mayoral Podcast. Thank you, everyone, for tuning back into the Mayoral Podcast. I know it's been a little bit of time. I've done a little bit of traveling over the last few weeks and didn't really have time to sit down and put together an episode. Now, during that time frame, the Durham probe concluded into the Trump-Russia story and came up with basically nothing showing that there should have even been an investigation into Donald Trump in the first place. Now, that gets you wondering, how did this thing start from the very beginning? So I take a look at really a brief history of what happened. So in the summer of 2015, it came out that Trump was colluding with Russia. Now this is about August of 2016, and the stories are really based on a wild rumor that came out from a lower level staffer in Trump's campaign that had a conversation at a bar that basically amounted to no evidence of anything whatsoever, and the FBI should have basically maybe investigated a little bit, but not investigated it to the extent that they did. They certainly shouldn't have opened an entire case. Now, that led to the Steele dossier being promoted from both the left-wing media and the Clinton campaign. The Steele dossier was something that was completely fabricated. It was based in no truth at all, and was promoted as the gospel when it came to this Trump-Russia collusion story. So with no evidence that could be corroborated, really all that needed to be done from the FBI was maybe a handful of phone calls investigating the origins of the Steele dossier, and would have realized that this is not credible evidence for collusion. But because the FBI is an apparatus of the left-wing politics in this country, they decided to move forward with the investigation anyway. Now, the Obama administration was certainly briefed during this time frame. What level they may or may not have been involved with regards to this remains to be seen. However, they were aware of this situation. So Hillary Clinton's campaign puts out this information, and it's known that her campaign is behind this information. The FBI doesn't see that as a conflict of interest at all. They pursue the claims and open the investigation into Donald Trump, which ends up leading to an entire investigation during essentially the entire duration of his presidency. The only time you really didn't hear much about Donald Trump and Russia in the media was when COVID-19 came around. So a lot of different things that happened there. Again, the false dossier, the kind of hearsay of a staffer in a bar somewhere, with that leading to the application for the FISA warrant, which was littered in lies as well, just like the Steele dossier. Now, again, the Clinton the Clinton campaign, the FBI worked hand in glove, working to try to push this narrative throughout the media. Then the Obama administration was briefed during this time frame, and there was no action by the Obama administration saying, hey, this needs to be shut down. Again, I don't know what level the Obama administration was or was not involved. I don't think anyone really knows truly the answer to that, but they were aware of the situation and let it happen. So that brings us to the media reaction. Initially, when this happened, the media was acting as if this was the worst thing that had ever happened in the history of American politics, which realistically, it ended up being the worst thing that happened, or the biggest scandal, rather, that happened in the history of American politics, at least within the last 100 years, but it was on the other side. So here's a brief recap of how the media reacted when the Trump-Russia story first broke.
NBC News reported last week, on the day Sessions recused himself on Thursday, NBC reported on the basis of two sources that Senate Intelligence Committee headed by Richard Burr, who was part of the Trump campaign, NBC reported that committee was interested in talking to the author of the dossier. the author of the dossier, the former MI6 officer who prepared this sheaf of information, first for private clients and then reportedly who brought it to the FBI himself in the summer of last year when he was so disturbed by what he found, by what he concluded about collusion between the Trump folks and the Russians. Again, what he found was evidence. What he says he found was evidence not just of Russia attacking the U.S. presidential election, but one party in that election, the Trump campaign, helping, going along with it, colluding, being part of it. And that is way worse allegation than just the Russians attacking our election, right? Or the Trump campaign having inexplicable contacts with Russians that they keep forgetting. The allegation of collusion is very, 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 very serious. Right? I mean, it's sort of as serious as it gets.
So take that and compare it to the reaction right now. There's articles all over the place making this seem like this was an absolute nothing burger coming from the Durham report. It was a nothing burger. It was a nothing burger of evidence into the Trump-Russia collusion story. So they're trying to completely dismiss this story as if it had absolutely nothing, no effect whatsoever. It was completely legitimate, and everything that happened should have happened the way that it did. They did this all based on nothing. There was no evidence at all for them to even open the investigation. The FBI should have dismissed this case or dismissed this information as nothing more than just some hearsay. There was no concrete evidence to look into the Trump administration. Now, remember in the 1970s, when Nixon spied on his political opponents, he didn't do that using the FBI. He just used some random goons or people that he knew and trusted, and that led to Watergate, which led to him resigning as president of the United States. This is the Democrat Party using the FBI to spy on their political opponents. That's significantly worse than Nixon picking a couple of guys up off the street and telling them to plant some bugs in the Watergate Hotel. Here's the media's reaction to what just happened with the Durham report.
He said they used raw, unanalyzed, and uncorroborated intelligence. He believes some personnel involved had a predisposition against Trump. Said there was no evidence of collusion, but he doesn't recommend wholesale new charges or any wholesale changes. So essentially, he says they screwed up.
Right.
But it's not a giant problem. Is that fair?
Well, I mean, look, it is a big problem that the FBI made a lot of the mistakes that were documented in this report. The problem for Durham is that he was brought in after a very, very exhaustive Inspector General report found pretty much everything he just described in 2019. He was appointed because the former president was obsessed with this idea that he was spied on, that there was a deep state cabal that was out to get him. There was all of these things that were promised that, Durham himself, raised expectations of what he was going to find, and none of that panned out. In the end, what Durham found is that, these are human beings. There were very, very extraordinary circumstances. You had a candidate, right, who was being shunned by the establishment. So he brought in a lot of these third-rate people, some of whom had issues and connections in Russia. And so that is partly what drove the FBI. They made a lot of mistakes, but it appears, according to Durham, it wasn't a political bias. It was simply confirmation bias. It was what prosecutors and sometimes what FBI agents do.
The media's reaction tells everything. The fact that they're making this seem as if this is kind of business as usual, the FBI and the Clinton campaign didn't act out of the ordinary, is really quite ridiculous, and there needs to be an immediate investigation into everyone that was involved in this Russia scandal, this attempt to collude to sway the election one way in the favor of Hillary Clinton, not only by the Clinton campaign, but with the assistance of the FBI and essentially the indifference at best of the Obama administration. Now, imagine if this had gone the other way, the media's reaction, if this had been a story that happened against the Obama administration. So I'm going to read part of the executive summary of the Durham investigation, but all I did in it was change Trump to Obama, Clinton to McCain, and where Obama's mentioned, it's mentioned as the president, I put the president at the time, which was George Bush. Imagine if this had happened against the Obama administration or the Obama campaign back in 2008. I also changed the dates up, obviously, because Obama initially ran in 2008. At that time, the president was a Republican, and the opposition, obviously, to Barack Obama was going to be a Republican, a sitting senator in John McCain. Imagine if McCain had done what Clinton had done. So I'm going to just read part of the executive summary, changing those names. And you judge for yourself. What would have actually happened with the media if this had come out that this was a story fabricated by John McCain in order to influence the results of the 2008 election? The speed and manner in which the FBI opened and investigated Crossfire Hurricane during the presidential election season, based on raw, unanalyzed, and uncorroborated intelligence, also reflected a noticeable departure from how it approached prior matters involving possible attempts for foreign election interference amid the McCain campaign. As described in Section 4, in the 18 months leading up to the 2008 election, the FBI was required to deal with a number of proposed investigations that had the potential of affecting the election. In each of those instances, the FBI moved with considerable caution. In one such manner discussed in Section 4, FBI headquarters and department officials required defensive briefings to be provided to McCain and other officials or candidates who appeared to be the targets of foreign election interference. In another, the FBI elected to end an investigation after one of its longtime and valued CHSs went beyond what was authorized and made an improper and possibly illegal financial contribution to the McCain campaign on behalf of a foreign entity as a precursor to a much larger donation being contemplated. And in a third, the McCain Foundation matter, both senior FBI and department officials placed restrictions on how those matters were to be handled, such that essentially no investigation activities occurred for months leading up to the election. These examples are also markedly different from the FBI's actions with respect to other highly significant intelligence it received from a trusted foreign source pointing to a McCain campaign plan to vilify Obama by trying to link him to Vladimir Putin so as to divert attention from his own concerns relating his use of a private email server. Unlike FBI's opening of a full investigation of unknown members of the Obama administration campaign based on raw, uncorroborated information, in this separate matter involving a purported McCain campaign plan, the FBI never opened any type of inquiry, issued any tasking, employed any analytical personnel, or produced any analytical products in connection with the information. This lack of action was despite the fact that the significance of the McCain plan intelligence was such as to have prompted the director of the CIA to brief the president, George W. Bush, Vice President Dick Cheney, Attorney General, Director of the FBI, and other senior government officials about its content within days of its receipt. It was also enough importance for the CIA to send a formal written referral memorandum to the director and the deputy assistant director of the FBI's counterintelligence division for their consideration and action. Within days of opening Crossfire Hurricane, the FBI opened full investigations on 4 members of the Obama campaign team. No defensive briefing was provided to Obama or anyone in the campaign concerning the information received from Australia that suggested there might be some type of collusion between the Obama campaign and the Russians, either prior to or after these investigations were open. Instead, the FBI began working on requests for the U.S. FISA authorities against 2 Obama campaign team members. The efforts were unsuccessful until Crossfire Hurricane investigators first obtained what were designated as, quote, company intelligence reports generated by Christopher Steele. The Steele reports were first provided to the FBI in early July of 2008, but for unexplained reasons only made their way to Crossfire Hurricane investigations in mid-September. The reports were ostensibly assembled based on information provided to Steele and his company by a primary source, who the FBI eventually determined in December of 2008 was Igor Danchenko. Our investigation determined that the Crossfire Hurricane investigators did not and could not corroborate any of the substantive allegations contained in the Steele dossier reporting, nor was Steele able to produce any corroboration for any of the reported allegations, even after being offered $1 million or more by the FBI for such corroboration. Further, when interviewed by the FBI in January of 2009, Danchenko was unable to corroborate any of the substantive allegations in the reports. Rather, Danchenko characterized the information he provided to Steele as, quote, rumor and speculation and a product of casual conversation. What I just read was the executive summary or parts of the executive summary from the Durham report, just swapping out a few of the names. What I really wanted to illustrate there was how damning the report is, and for people that were on, or maybe on the other side of the aisle that maybe don't see it, if you were to read it with different names and say John McCain, one of the sitting U.S. senators, the presidential candidate for president of the United States in 2008, colluded with the FBI with no evidence launched a full-scale investigation into the Obama campaign, and based on this evidence, even after Obama's inauguration, was still using that to appoint a special counsel into the potential collusion between the Obama campaign and Russia to get Barack Obama elected president. And the sitting president of the United States, George W. Bush, his vice president, and all of his, or most of his cabinet members were briefed on the situation, knowing that this was all coming from the McCain campaign, were complicit at best in allowing this investigation to continue. If this report had come out 2 years after Barack Obama left office, that everything during his presidency that was being investigated with regards to him being a foreign agent, him colluding with a foreign entity to become president of the United States, was all fabricated by John McCain, and the Bush administration was complicit in knowing that McCain was fabricating these stories, the calls for the FBI to be reformed would be unbelievably loud from the media and from the left wing, and rightfully so. There should not be this level of distrust in the institutions that we have in the United States. Unfortunately, that's where we are here today. We need to make sure that these people that colluded to fabricate this story against the Trump campaign are held accountable. It's incumbent upon the people in the Senate right now, the Republicans in the Senate and the Republicans in the House, to not let this go away. That's one of the biggest issues with the Republican Party right now, is they let things go and they do not pursue the justice that actually needs to happen. Now, it doesn't matter if this actually happened against Obama or if this happened against Trump. I would be in full support of every single person that broke the law going to jail. That needs to be the justice system. It doesn't matter which side of the aisle is wrong or which side of the aisle is breaking the law. There needs to be a one-tier justice system, and every single person needs to be held equally accountable for their actions under the law. And in order for these people to learn, there needs to be jail time. It's not enough for these people to be disgraced. It's not enough for them to lose their job. They're going to end up on cable news even if they lose their job anyway. Jail time is how these people learn and how we will prevent this from happening in the future. That's it for this episode of the Mayoral Podcast. Please make sure to hit the like, follow, and subscribe button. It's all free to do and takes only a matter of seconds. I will see you in the next video.